Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Political No Brainer, the podcast where we move past winner takes all politics and into real conversations. I'm Jeff Rabinowitz, and this season we're bringing in voices from all sides to challenge assumptions, bridge divides, and build a better understanding of today's biggest issues. Today I'm here with, and excited to be here with, Samantha Turner, a younger person. I usually get a lot of old people on my show, so this is a nice treat. And that's really what we want to do is we want to engage young people. I think we have engaged young people. I do believe I give that credit to Donald Trump. He sort of has really reinvigorated the debate of politics to all sorts of audiences, if you will. And so to that, he gets my one piece of credit. Other than that, he gets a big fat pile of crap from me. But he does get that credit. So here's what I think how we should start. We should start with you telling us, the audience, myself, the host, how you feel about what's going on today. Anything you want to talk about.
So I definitely have some notes. There's a long list of things that I have quite a few issues with since he became president again. Um, I think most notably would be what happened the other day, when the reporter was added to the apparently unclassified group chat where they were talking about the strikes on Yemen. Honestly, I'm just kind of shocked. Um, I really, really think that if the roles were reversed and Kamala was president, that this would be worse than Hillary Clinton's scandal. Um,
This would be huge
I,
if Kamala were president, but
yeah, yeah. But most notably, I think it's Trump basically saying that this wasn't a huge breach of national security. Um, I know that the messages showed that Hegseth disclosed the exact time that the American fighter jets were going to take off, which could have definitely endangered the lives of the pilots had they invited somebody different. Um, and I think it also said the Washington Post said that Pete Hegseth disclosed specific operational details 2 hours also before the U.S. troops launched attacks against their militia. And I mean, this contained several cabinet officials and White House staff members, and I'm just really shocked at the whole downplay of everything. Like, I feel like just because it happened during Trump's presidency and it's people directly under his wing, they're just going to try to shuffle it under the rug.
so we've got to come to the realization, some serious realizations. One, when we talk about the Houthi rebels that were bombed, they are extremely well financed and well armed by the Iranians. So we're not just arguing the point that we just delivered information to the Houthi rebels. This information went directly to the Iranians. Now, maybe they didn't have time to act on this information, but this whole thing could have turned into something a lot bigger. I mean, like you said, they knew the time. They knew the time the jets were leaving. They probably knew where they were coming from, if they were coming from an aircraft carrier or if they were coming. This is but then you've got to take it into the. Now let's just break it down a little. They keep talking about the principal partners were in this text group. The one of the principal partners, because we keep talking about Hegseth, we keep talking about JD Vance, we keep talking about Marco Rubio. So let's take it for Hegseth is a person that's never even ran a Taco Bell prior to getting the job of running a department with 3 million employees. Our whole entire national security is at his hands. Now you've got the vice president, who generally speaking, they say his one main job is to stay alive. So that's sort of like here nor there. He probably doesn't know what a group text is versus actually sitting in the situation room where this meeting should have been held. But you know who else was in that group text in that principal partners? Was Tulsi Gabbard, the national security advisor, who literally didn't know that this is a problem. Now, this is the person that wakes up at allegedly 4 a.m., compiles 18 reports from 18 different intelligence departments, compiles them, evaluates them, and then delivers to the president in short form what's important and what's not important. Now, just imagine the president's traveling and she has to deliver her report to him via some teleport. She doesn't know what's safe or not. She has no idea because apparently she was a part of this group text. So we're now getting down to the bottom of our. Not only is our defense secretary incompetent, our national security advisor is incompetent, our secretary of state should really know because we made the point, like you said, of Hillary Clinton using a private email server, which even the Justice Department went deep into an investigation ordered by Obama, and it said that really, really, truly, we haven't even litigated this whole thing with Hegseth in the group text, but we did litigate the whole Hillary Clinton thing through a legitimate Justice Department who said really there was no issue other than she broke procedure or policy or deliberately subverted policy. But there and yet, the president can sit there in the Oval Office and say this is no big deal. I think today he said it's no big deal. Essentially, I'm not quoting verbatim, but today he said it's just no big deal, and it's okay because Donald Trump is revered for the one rule of thumb that you remember for the rules you break. He was the businessman that broke all the rules and made billions. So break all the rules in foreign policy, and you're going to do good. I haven't seen no good come out of this presidency yet. I was told, according to the campaign, he's going to end the war in Ukraine in one day, the day before, the day after he takes office. He's now saying it's a little more difficult than he thought. He's gotten
Of
nowhere.
course.
He's gotten nowhere. It literally just agreed to not bomb the Black Sea area and allegedly agreed to not bomb each other's energy infrastructures, which I think went right on after that agreement was supposedly agreed to. And it's not just that we're not even into this for 90 days yet. And
Yeah.
this is already and there's conservatives that will literally, like Hegseth wrote a book, and there are conservatives who are revering him already for ridding the military of woke.
Well,
And then I say, okay, so how does this make any sense? Because Israel, one of the most, I guess you could say one of the most effective, certainly one of the busiest militaries in the world, will invite anybody to the table if you got something to offer. You can have purple hair, you can be gay. It's openly gay country and a military. But we're revering this new Secretary of Defense who somehow has an issue with being woke as our national security's biggest challenge. And now I just went on for a bit of a rampage there, but go ahead. Tell me what you're thinking.
I mean, I I've always struggled with people who find being quote unquote woke a bad thing. I feel like I'd rather have my eyes open to everything that's going on in this world than ignore current things that are happening and not be woke. They try to use woke as a derogatory term when in fact I feel like it really means they're scared of being informed and being well aware of the changes that are happening as a society. I think that the US military is going to face some really big hardships as far as getting people to come because they want to slash. Not, I'm not going to say that they're, you know, trans and gay people make up a significant portion, but whether or not they do, they still matter because they want to go and protect our country, and
Right.
they should be
Voluntarily.
treated just like everybody else.
Right. So you've not only got that.
It's
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, no, no. Go ahead. You're good.
You not only got that giant void, like you said, that now suddenly, I mean, they're ridding the military of woke people. So now you've got people that won't even come in. And it's like, and what was the issue to begin with?
Yeah,
Why, I mean, and DEI not only applies to that, but even if you
yeah,
look at your local highway, you look at a public bus and you see a bus now with a bike rack. So a person can actually ride their bike to the bus station and then ride their bike from the bus stop to their work. That's DEI. That's inclusion. It's including everybody. When you see a wheelchair ramp on a bus, that's inclusion. And the president has made it clear he will zero out any dollars that includes DEI in the terminology of the funding.
Yeah, I feel it stinks because it's not funny, but I find it laughable that Republicans feel like DEI just means that workforces are now allowed to hire any person just because they're a person of color. When in reality, it just gives everybody the same opportunity, even if they are a person of color. It doesn't mean that they are any less qualified than someone who is white and has the same education and same job requirements and job experience. It quite literally just means that everyone gets a fair shot as far as, the workplace. But like you said, simple things that people don't really think about being DEI are DEI. And they just I feel like Republicans are heavily focusing on workplace DEI and ensuring that places do not become woke instead of really taking the time to analyze or even explain to his followers what DEI actually means. They're just focusing on one little portion of what DEI is instead of looking at the bigger picture and how much taking away funding to DEI can affect everybody.
And we're literally in a place in time now where some people are calling it a constitutional crisis. I'm calling it where we literally no longer have any checks and balances. We've got we're still not at the point of a constitutional crisis. We're getting there fast, but we're not there. But we're still at a point where we have no accountability anymore. There's literally a president who it's like now. Okay, so everything he's doing is like a Republican's dream come true. Actually, Ronald Reagan, in his initial bid for president, said, "I'm closing the Department of Education." He became a president. He realized, as a logical man, I'm not necessarily conservative, but he was a logical thinker. He said, the Department of Education serves this big purpose, and it grew in size and scope. He didn't close it; it grew in size and scope. So now you've got this scenario where we're not just eliminating positions because of DEI. We're eliminating, for example, the Department of Education. We're shutting down the department, and they're saying they're going to transfer $1.5 trillion in student loans to the Treasury. Treasury can't even do the job they're doing at the moment. First of all, if we wind up in a government shutdown, Treasury's not even going to know how to handle what they have to do. Forget about taking on another $1.5 trillion on the books from another department. So it's either a constitutional crisis or it's just a catastrophe just waiting to happen. And there's no congressional leaders on the other side of the aisle that are saying this is a problem. Republicans are standing by and cheering. They got their most expensive crash dummy in the world. This is what they've wanted for 50 years. They've been wanting to turn a New Deal into the screw deal. They couldn't get anybody to do it. So they got this vindictive man that just loves to stir the pot and screw people. So they're really having their Super Bowl and they're really enjoying, but we're as Americans, we are going to be in a situation that at some point is there going to be some things we can't even turn back and fix. So being a young person, because I will prevail for this. I'm nearly 60 years old. I'll get through this. But how old are you?
I'm 21.
21 years old. So you've got this. You think of crisis as our biggest COVID as being our biggest crisis since World War II or since Vietnam, because Vietnam was really a giant shitstorm too. But now we've got a crisis cooking that we don't even know what's going to happen when it's all done. And when you're 21 years old, what do you think? What do you want to do? If you were to reach out to the Democratic Party or any party, I always say it's either red or blue because you have to have a franchise. Because if I open Jeff's or Coach Trippy's Burgers, I'm going to serve 50 people if I'm lucky the first day. If I open McDonald's, I'm going to serve 800 to 900 people on an average the first day. So you got to pick a side. If you were to decide to ever run for office, and you walk into this, he's going to be there for 4 years. There's no reason to believe his health is failing. He seems to be very vibrant. He's going to do this thing he does for the next 4 years. But if you were to start considering a run for office, what would you think would be where would you start to?
I mean, it's really hard to just try and focus on one thing because being 21 years old and feeling like you may not be able to experience the same future that your parents got when they were growing up is pretty devastating. I mean, at one point, I was in college and also working two additional jobs and dog sitting and babysitting on the side. Um, and I probably still couldn't move out even if I wanted to. I think back to how, you know, how affordable housing used to be. And now it's really hard to find any home that's less than $400,000 and not the size of an apartment. Um, I think that not, I don't want to be offensive at all, but the older generation, I feel like, has a lot of stigmas against the younger generation. They think that we don't like to work. They think that we don't care about our jobs. And, they're very hesitant to hire younger people because they feel like we're not going to stick around, especially if they are very aware that the workplace situation is not ideal. Um, I I just really find it pretty devastating that we're now left having to deal with a generation where we might never be able to experience the same thing that our parents did due to money, due to lessening on environmental, restrictions and regulations. I mean, he already did massive layoffs to hundreds and thousands of national park workers. And a lot of people don't really realize the true importance of that, which is pretty scary. And I'm somebody who loves to travel. I'm sure you know me and my sister, we travel any chance that we get.
I do
And
know because I follow your travel.
yes, um, I do want to see all the national parks. I want to take every single one off of my bucket list. But even now, people are reporting that some national parks have to be closed at certain points during the week because they don't have enough people. And a lot of national park workers don't just, sit there and tell people facts about the national parks. They're taking, down any sort of information that could help about trees and diseases that hit plants and taking temperature of, waters and geysers and, any sort of thing that could be important for climate change or helping us understand more, which is something that most Republicans don't even believe in. Um, and I feel like I'm going on a ramble, but I think
Not
that
at all, because
basically,
everything you're saying makes perfect sense.
yeah.
But so just go, not on a ramble, just go on.
Um, so that was, I guess, my worry about just the environment in general. And I might be wrong, but didn't Republicans introduce a bill to basically lessen restrictions on clean water?
Well, so this has been an ongoing process. So, and okay, so you literally, to say is that one initiative that just recently happened or not. So let's give you an example. Donald Trump nominated three conservative judges to the Supreme Court. One of the rulings they just ruled on was a ruling called Chevron. Now, what Chevron said was when a company argues a point of, just say, offshore drilling. Well, this is what Chevron, the ruling, said. And the government brings in an expert to say that the company's argument is not a safe environmental policy. But this is the expert arguing. So let's say it's a Republican run company against a Democratic run government employee. Chevron dictated that the judge would have to listen to the expert. So for 50 years of precedent, we were listening to the experts on, and then we had the overzealous conservative companies wanted to drill wherever they wanted to drill and different things, but we were always listening to the expert. So if the expert said this will just decimate this ocean front, or this will just decimate the environment, the judge would have had to listen to the experts. Chevron and the Supreme Court overturned that. The only thing they said that sort of was a caveat in that ruling is you can't go back on the last 50 years, but moving forward. So they didn't say we're going to reverse 50 years of rulings. They at least left that untouched. But who knows if they won't touch that next. So when you're talking about a movement on the environment as far as a conservative assault on the environment, it's ongoing. So then comes, the argument that we just take it too serious. Well, we don't take it too serious. It's an issue. We know it's an issue. We see the devastation. We know North Carolina was a 50-year storm. That means that you don't expect this type of thing to happen and it happened. We know that what caused a lot of it was all the roads that have been added to that area. There's nowhere for the water to percolate, so the flooding just stays above ground now. We know there was no consideration, and when we say there should have been consideration, we're just these libtards, liberal tears arguing these points. So when you talk about the left versus the right on the environment, that's what I was leading to. Is like if you ran for the U.S. House of Representatives, because the idea of the U.S. House of Representatives was a person runs, takes their concerns in their community to Washington for 2 years and goes back home and runs their farm or runs their business. Now we got these guys staying in office for 100 years till they die. But if you were this person, if you were this young person like AOC, who at times I say I can't, the winner takes all thing is kind of not my thing. So and she is a winner takes all politician. She believes in has to be a progressive movement. We have to get everything we want. I don't believe in that. I believe there's compromise. But if you were the next AOC who got elected, went to Washington, what would what would be something you would bring to like what would be your bowl of rice? Would it be the environment? Would it be the parks? I mean, you would have that ear. You would have that position where you could start talking about something because they're decimating everything. So where would you start fixing things?
I mean, I definitely think that the environment would be at the top of my list, but as far as growing up in Florida, and attending school when this was something that was very prevalent, I think that my biggest focus would be trying to lessen the amount of school shootings that even Florida alone has. My first year of high school, I ended up in a lockdown in the first quarter for 4 hours because there was a report that there was going to be a school shooting. There was SWAT that showed up. There were helicopters all over our school, police officers, sheriffs, news stations, everything. And we really had no idea what was going on while we were stuck inside closets inside of our classrooms. I quite literally can only imagine what it feels like to have been in an actual school shooting. I find it pretty revolting that when it's something that is important to the Republican Party, or rather something that puts them at a risk, they can get anything done in a matter of days. But they still can't stop or even lessen school shootings and implement stricter gun laws. Like I really just I find that mind-boggling. Like school shooters get less of a sentence than women now do for getting abortions. And I'm, for lack of better words, flabbergasted at something like this. And especially because Ron DeSantis enabled pretty much anybody in Florida to own a gun without having any background check or prior credentials or training. You really never know how safe you are, you know, pretty much anywhere you go. People are scared to honk at other people in traffic if they're not driving correctly for fear of a gun being, aimed at them, which I've actually seen a video of a road rager who ended up pointing a gun at a driver because they were just pissed at what they did. And it's insane that you don't have to go through a severe background check and mental health check and really anything check before you have the ability to take somebody's life away. I feel like that would be my biggest talking point is making sure that no kid ever has to go through what so many have already gone through
And you've
because it
gone
shouldn't
through
be a
it.
normal.
And you've gone through it. You were in a school, I mean, the threat of a school shooting. You were literally in a school when there was the threat, when there was that concern.
And that first year, actually, we had one lockdown every quarter, which I think is probably a record of some sort. And they were thankfully all taken seriously, but it's not even something that should happen. You know, they actually put up walk through metal detectors at the bus stops where the buses would drop you off in the morning um, in order to try and catch somebody if they did have a weapon of some sort. And that is not something you should ever have to worry about when you're going to get an education.
No, you shouldn't have to worry about it. It is a proactive measure, which is, again, something we may have to deal with. I've talked about the NRA has a program called School Shield. They will literally go over the school safety program. They will make suggestions. But like you said, the fact that we have this concern is concerning. And then you've got, when you say, I got the Second Amendment, I get it that people should be able to own a gun, but when you say that life has gotten more complicated, people have gotten more mental illness than at any rate in life before because of one of the things the mental illness stems from is growing chasm between rich and poor. There are some people that just aren't making do. Like you said, they can't get a home. So when you argue the point that at least let's mitigate the problem by saying at least let's have some mental background checks, at least let's have some proficiency, some need for some proof of proficiency. If you're going to buy a gun, you should be able to handle it correctly. And you should be able to pass a criminal background check and a mental background check. And the conservatives and the NRA both argue the point that you give a liberal an inch, they want an arm. Well, we want safety. We want some level of safety. We want some level of logic. I get it. They keep arguing if you outlaw guns, only guns will be outlawed. Well, if you outlaw abortions, only outlaws will have abortions. I mean, and that's what basically happened with the Dobbs ruling is they said the states can regulate the practice, and some states have gone to such an extreme that really only the affluent will be able to navigate the system, whereas a poor person could die from not being able to receive a needed abortion. And when you ask even for that to be mitigated, it's just this whole conservative versus liberal. We've gotten to that point where we can't agree on anything, which is in it's like that's why I encourage young people to get involved just like you somehow get show up for your local Democrat caucus meetings because Democrats do have a lot of priorities. It's one of the things I've always said is the Republicans keep it simple. They've got like three signature items. They've got their close relationship with the military, they've got their close relationship with big business, and that's really their only two signature items. Whereas we have a lot of priorities. I would love to see, whether you close the education department or not, I would love to see an enormous investment in our K through 12 public education system. And I say if we're spending money and we're not having false starts and we're not having epic fails, we're simply not swinging the bat hard enough. We have done nothing with our K through 12 public education system in 50 years. It's the same system. It's the same brick and mortar buildings that we've had. But then when I talk about things like in Washington D.C., where affluent kids go, presidents' kids and senators' kids, they go to a school called um, they go to Sidwell Friends, and that school's amazing. It's they teach about the environment. The property is environmentally friendly. They teach about all sorts of things that we should be doing in our public schools all across the country. And you wouldn't have to have legislation if you just had an understanding of how to care for the environment, why it's important. And that's why I ask young people, what would you do? And like you said, school safety is a giant issue. The other thing we have a giant issue is school suicides. It's
At my school, actually, they ended up putting up a memorial wall because we had several students commit suicide in my only 4 years of being there. And realistically, it was actually only 2 years that I was there because I did dual enrollment and I was at Valencia getting my associate's degree so that I could have it by the time I graduated high school. Um, and that is, I mean, not only do conservatives and Republicans not believe in mental health issues, um, but not believing in it makes it worse for everybody. It solves no problems when you just try to act like something isn't real. And the fact that we had so many students commit suicide that they ended up putting up a memorial wall is honestly, I mean, it's just another thing that I'm sure other American students have had to go through that should not be a normal.
No, children suicide. I say children because, of course, I am old, but a 17-year-old or a 15-year-old. And there's literally a list of them that have committed suicide that I didn't even know of that list. And I reach out to every possible person to know more about what's going on. And I never even knew in schools there's a memorial for kids. We shouldn't have any kids die before they graduate high school. And I'm not, and I know there's terrible diseases, and I know, I mean, we have kids committing suicide and nobody takes notice of that. And I just got off the phone with a school board member who said he initiated where they have mental health personnel in every school, and it worked. He feels like his initiatives at least saved 4 children from doing something bad. And I said, then if you've got this program in place, increase it significantly. How can we better spend our money than invest in our children? And the old saying is, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow. How can we not? And we don't even get that acknowledgement that all you we literally the only acknowledgement we're seeing is, and when we point out, I say Trump bashing, but the reason I Trump bash so much is because so many people revere the shit he's doing. And it's like, stop building castles in the sky. You got a guy that's closing the Department of Education via, it won't work via executive order, but it will pass in the House and the Senate. And you've got no plan to fix what you're doing. You're only demolishing something. And they love it.
I know you know, a lot of people are saying that they're not getting rid of the Department of Education, they're just moving it. But like you mentioned before, wherever they move it to can already hardly do their jobs as it is. So now adding on additional responsibilities for, you know, organizations that are not even equipped to handle it, you're only going to end up having kids suffer.
You're only,
I mean,
yeah.
he just recently he wanted, or I mean, he is doing cuts to Pell Grants and other federal student funding. And this is only going to make it harder for students to afford a higher education. I mean, I myself was on, a federally funded student program through Bright Futures, which Florida offers. And I was able to have 75% of my tuition paid. Had I not had that, I do not think that I would have my bachelor's degree. Um, I mean, they're more worried about taking away free lunches for kids than something that could be astronomically more important to get rid of. I mean, I'd rather my taxpayer dollars go towards free lunches for kids than towards however many golf trips Donald Trump decides to go on.
Well, and the thing about free lunches is, and I've made this argument. I've made this argument so many times. I'm so tired of mozzarella sticks in a paper bag being called a free lunch. It's crap. And I've said another great way to invest money is to build dining halls in all our schools with real plateware, real silverware, vegan options, vegetarian options, healthy options, and some pizza and some fried chicken, but make it a dining experience because you've literally got kids that leave school and that's the only meal they have. They go home to a mom that's passed out from either working really hard or passed out from something other that I'm not going to be just knock people. I'm going to say that, and these kids go home to an empty kitchen. These kids don't go home to a kid's meal. So if you've got this opportunity and this place in this world where every kid corrals during the day, take that opportunity to feed them one real healthy meal. Let them understand healthy options. Let them realize that as they get older, healthy options aren't the worst thing. And you've got this opportunity. I once talked to an attorney. I still have his card. He was from California. He talked about how the difference was the kids that went home and didn't have a meal and the criminal life that ensued. How the difference was the kids with food insecurity were bound to find a path to a criminal life. And the kids that did go home to a hot meal every day were significantly less uh, good, had a significantly less percentage or potential for finding a life of crime. So you've got this opportunity to make that difference, and that enormous investment and that simple program could literally pay itself off 10 times because might reduce crime. You've also got the reality that younger people in these dire situations come to the realization at very young ages the one thing they have to trade over and above their older competition is themselves. So you could literally mitigate human trafficking if you were to really really invest in some of these things. But we don't have any of that going on now. Now, I've always said maybe this issue people have with what Donald Trump is demolitioning is the fact that we kept adding to it for 50 years and we just kept adding to it. But if we added to it in a way that really had a constructive return, and that's what I'm trying to say is how can we recreate the Democratic Party with a vigorous amount of young people and a vigorous amount of great new ideas? Because Republicans have an emotional bond to their voters. And I feel like Democrats really don't. Democrats, you just like, and I even said, even though they have that emotional bond, Donald Trump didn't have that emotional bond. What he had was the sense that it's the better the devil you know. Kamala Harris didn't have an opportunity to present herself. She had 90 days to establish this enormous task of establishing a national campaign. She did pretty good at it. But when it came to the
I mean, I
swing
would say for
states,
90 days, yeah.
yeah, 90 days. And everybody knows when you look at the math, when you look at the map, you say right now until the demographics change, both you get a Republican and you get a Democrat running for president. Both are going to reach 220 electoral votes. How do you get to the 270? The swing states. And that's where we're saying the undecided is going to make this decision. The undecided went with the better the devil you know. So we missed a huge opportunity. So I'm just trying to get to the bottom of from a young person's mind. I'm always looking for young people to talk to. How do we rebuild the Democratic Party? Because we've really this next 4 years is going to cost everyone across the board dearly.
Yeah, I mean, like you said in the beginning, there's going to be a lot of things that will probably be irreversible, at least for a very long time. Um, I feel like it's very hard to kind of restructure the Democratic Party because one, I really, really think that what people want is a leader where they don't have to think, they don't have to worry about anything. They're just going to let him make all of the decisions and they can just sit back. I mean, he quite Donald Trump said it himself that they're probably not going to have to worry about voting. And they didn't because he did win. Again, Kamala didn't have, as much time as she probably should have. But the Republican Party lacks a lot of empathy. And I think whether or not they believe it's a serious issue, it really is. Because that's the only thing that will make you care about kids getting free school lunches. That's the only thing that will make you care about student aid programs and Pell Grants and, discrimination against people now that DEI has had a huge rollback. I feel like Republicans take their privilege and they don't want anyone else to experience it. And instead, most of the Democratic Party takes their privilege and wants everybody to end up experiencing that same privilege. I mean, I myself, I'm an incredibly privileged person, and I don't take that for granted. And I think that it's very important to be self aware that when you are privileged, you have to understand that you are. I did come home to meals every day. I never had to worry about my school lunch, being made or paid for. I can't imagine the gutting feeling that some kids got when they were turned away at the lunch line because they didn't have enough money on their account. I can't imagine how unfair that felt. And I was raised to be very empathetic and to always make sure that if I'm present, I don't I would be the first person to speak up if I saw somebody being racist or bigoted or misogynistic or anything like that, because a lot of people, especially as of recent with Trump's massive deportations and increase in racism towards anybody who even has a hint of looking like an undocumented immigrant, you know, a lot of these people are being targeted and they have nobody to speak up for them. And, I what can you do as a person besides want to stand up for somebody that cannot stand up for themselves? And I know that the Democratic Party has, pushed this a lot, and they voice that they care about DEI and inclusivity and students getting free lunches and making sure that we have affordable housing and affordable college tuition. But especially in times like right now, when somebody like myself feels pretty defeated that there are no checks and balances, and it feels like he's pretty much able to get away with whatever he wants. I feel like the Democratic Party is not being loud enough. They're not being loud enough about everything that's going on. And I'm sure that they're doing a bunch of work behind closed doors that we're not able to see yet. But the reassurance that Kamala was able to give in those 90 days made at least myself very hopeful that, what, maybe I don't have to worry about my future so much. Maybe I don't have to worry about, being able to afford a house in the future because it might become affordable. And, you know, Trump actually campaigned that he was going to lower grocery prices and lower gas prices and lower housing. And I think what a lot of Republicans don't understand is that if he did that, Democrats would in fact be happy by those decisions. I'm sure that he would be fully backed in those decisions, but he only said those things because all of his followers, I mean, have pretty much no critical thinking skills. They can't, they believe every single thing that he says like it's the gospel. And, a lot of people I saw do not even understand what a tariff is and how it will fall back on the consumer until after he became president. And by then, anybody who's regretful is too late. It's too late. And it's it's hard to see people say that they regret voting for him for president when they had the same information and the same tools that we did, and they still decided to vote for him. They're studying after the test has already been taken. But to circle back to what you said, that's how I feel right now, is I would like the Democratic Party to be louder about calling people out and making it known that, you know, they are in the works of making sure that some of these things don't happen. Regardless of whether or not checks and balances are in place, we know that they're not, but it would be helpful to have some sort of reassurance that, we can have a little bit of hope that not everything he does will be the end all be all.
So when you say that Democrats aren't loud enough, that's the first thing I want to start off with. I want to say, you know what I don't think they're loud enough about? Because Donald Trump is the king of antics. He's the king of reality TV. He's the king of being loud and saying he's brilliant, saying he's accomplishing things. What Democrats are not loud enough is the things they've accomplished. So when it comes to this mass deportation, it's not that massive. But I will say this Obama's 8 year watch, he deported 1.2 million people based on illegal activity, based on criminal activity. We followed the rules of due process. We followed the rules of them not showing up for hearings they were scheduled for. They broke the rules and they were deported. Now, Trump literally loads up a plane with 200 people and sends them to Colombia and gets into this giant tiff with the Colombian government, who is our ally, and makes this whole thing like he's just this aggressive deporter. And all Colombia is saying is, we don't even know who these people are. You haven't even given us the proper paperwork. We can't just take 200 people off a plane that you sent here when we don't even know who they are. Even facial machinery isn't working on some of these people. They're not from Colombia. So, but then in the end, the Colombian government said, "To hell with it. I'm not going to get into a pissing match with the president of the United States." And it looks like such a big deal he did. It's like such an accomplishment. And the fact of the matter is, you've never heard a Democratic politician argue the point that we are the aggressive. We have an aggressive approach to deporting people that are not should not be here for whatever reason, for illegal activity, for not abiding by the rules. And there should be rules. There should be paths to citizenship. But there's not even that because we've never even gotten that far in the House or the Senate. The other thing I don't think we're
Yeah.
allowed in when Republicans talk about business and when they talk about your ability to really profiteer in this great society of you really and it was just you really live in a place in America where there's prosperity is possible. The Affordable Care Act enabled people to prosper. If you were the kind of guy that was working for Twitter, just using Twitter for the hell of it, sitting at your desk and you just, you like I have a fridge in my office and I'm just eating snacks and you have this terrible type 2 or 3 diabetes, whatever it's called. You could literally leave Twitter, start your own business and still be eligible for health care because you're not beholden to your group plan. That's really the Affordable Care Act, I always said should have been called the Available Care Act. There's times when it's not affordable, and you don't even have to have it during those times because you know what? If you do get diagnosed with something terrible, you go and get insurance at the same rate you would pay. You're based on age and gender. You're not based on having this terrible condition. So, as the where I'm landing with this is when we talk about what Democrats are not loud enough about, it's they're not loud enough about some of the realistic approaches they've taken to some of the biggest problems Trump argued over and over and over again. He argued them in a way that he creates this bullshit story, but he's so convinced of himself and he convinces everybody that he's the greater. He literally went to when he was a businessman and he went to the New Jersey Gaming Commission and the rule was you can't game under Chapter 11 in New Jersey. He went to the committee and he said, well, "I'm taking over the business, and when I take things over, I fix them." So he got a sort of a hall pass to keep operating casinos, even though he couldn't pay his bills. And then he filed bankruptcy 2 weeks later. But he went to this committee and he convinced them he's the guy that's going to fix it. And he convinced America he's going to fix America. And he hasn't done anything except served his billionaire friends because there's an old saying, don't ever waste a good crisis. His billionaire friends aren't wasting this crisis. They're going to profiteer on every bit of this. If there's a
Absolutely.
yeah, like if you think of any economic crisis, when you see an economic crisis ensuing, it's like the first signs you see is General Motors laid off 25,000 people. Well, the federal government just laid off 2 million people, as far as I can tell. This is a big writing on the wall that we're going to have an economic problem. When you hear the grumblings of bigger companies starting layoffs, JP Morgan laid off 10,000 financial advisors. It's 10,000 employees. Yeah, when the government's literally saying we're about to nix 3 million jobs, it's a lot of jobs about to come to an end. That's a lot of you're really looking at a crisis ahead. And those billionaires that are his very dear friends are going to really make some money on that deal. So if those houses get foreclosed on, they're going to be the ones to buy them up cheap. If there's if there's this influx of cheap labor, because people do get desperate at times and start working for less, they're going to be the ones that's going to benefit from the lesser cost of labor. But
Yeah.
America's convinced that I always tell the story. I was on I-4 the other day. It's been months now, but there was this guy, and this truck was so old that between the bed and the cab, it was literally separating. And in the back of the truck was like, for I could tell there was like a mop bucket. I believe it was a pressure cleaner. I believe it was a wheelbarrow. There was garden tools, and he's got a Trump flag. I'm like, what is Trump going to do to change your economic outcome? Do you really think that you're going to go from this guy? And I'm not saying you're not a hardworking man that does one job at a time. You're going to suddenly have 30 employees when Trump's president, and you're going to have a whole new fleet of trucks because I haven't seen that happen under any presidency. If you're still driving this. And he probably
Yeah.
believes that that's the prosperity's on the way because Trump's going to get reelected.
I mean, the biggest accomplishment that I think Trump has had so far is convincing a bunch of low income people that billionaires are going to care about them, that they're taking the time out of their day to care about somebody who could never even see their same tax bracket. Like, unless you're making over $400,000 a year, you're not going to profit off of
Oh,
Trump's policies. And
oh,
that's what people don't understand is you're not even in the right tax bracket to be saying some of the things that you are. Like it's astonishing that the most red states are also the ones that are the least educated. I mean, statistically looking at it, the deepest of red states are the least educated people. And really, it shows a lot. I mean, it's easier to, you know, convince somebody to be fooled when they don't have the right resources to prove that you're wrong, or even the passion or the drive to prove that you're wrong. And I just I find it, interesting what you said, because it is a lot of hard workers that do believe that Trump is going to come and turn their entire lives around and make them prosper. And he didn't do that in his first presidency, and
not at
it's
all.
not going to happen in this one.
Not at all. And like you said, it's funny that you said, like the people, like the buyer's remorse of Trump, the people don't realize what Trump was going to do. Google still today says the most Google thing ever was Brexit, the British exit. Nobody in Britain knew what the Brexit was, but they voted for it. Back then, there was Cambridge Analytica, who was doing allegedly a scientific political project hobby, and they spread this path of belief that if the Brits exit the European Union, Britain will prosper. And then when the vote came through and they said, "Wow, we've exited," what exactly does that mean? That's the same thing to Trump now. Like there is no Google. You can't Google what Trump is doing or not doing because Brexit was a definitive policy. You've exited the European currency. But what people also don't realize is talking about the EU. What people also don't realize is when the European Union came together and created one currency, right? There was there was countries like Germany that would have prospered under one currency or their own currency or on the multiple currencies in Europe. But there was countries like Spain and Greece that were very big on social programs, very big on entitlement programs, but their economies weren't that strong, so they had very small economies, very weak economies. When they joined the European Union, they suddenly had AAA credit ratings. So they borrowed from the World Bank, and all they did with that money is fund more social programs or give their city workers raises. When they went broke, the EU demanded they cut back on those social programs. When they cut back on those social programs, their debt crisis got worse. Their ability to pay got worse. It's the same thing in America. When you eliminate all these social programs, you come to the realization that social programs, government contracts, government spending is a significant part of our economy. When you when you if Walmart stock plummets because nobody's grocery shopping simply because they don't get food stamps, 401ks are going to plummet because they're in every Walmart stock is in every 401k. When government employees no longer have jobs and you've got 2 million government employees who are either claiming unemployment or looking for a similar clerical type job that the same 2 million people are looking for when in fact there may only be 60,000 of those jobs out there, you're going to have a big problem. And then you might have that Brexit Google effect where people are saying, what the hell just happened? And there won't be any clarity because maybe I always say my podcast will serve as the clarity, but it won't because they're still going to be convinced that Trump got it all right and Democrats really went out of their way to screw the pooch. And I've never seen a Democratic Party, just like you say, has never communicated a message that really resonates with people. Because it really doesn't. All it really says is we're going to champion the vulnerable, and all it says to the vulnerable is with them we'll always be vulnerable. So let's jump to the other side because I want to be rich. I want to be a
Yep.
casino owner, or I want to at least be able to go to Trump's casinos and like the lady he writes about because he's written so many books. He wrote about a lady that lost $1 million, a prince, a Saudi prince that lost $1 million, and then sent him a letter about what a great time he had. And it's like, yeah, it's a Saudi prince. It's not even their money. They're robbing the poor to get that money, and they're squandering it in your casino, and then they're leaving, and there's more money waiting for them when they get home. But that's your clientele, and that's all you've ever
Yep.
catered to. Why do poor people think you'll ever cater to them?
I mean, truthfully, it's a great question. Um, and I honestly think that, the encouragement to buy Teslas most recently is probably one of the more out of touch moments that he's had because, you're sitting here encouraging people to buy this car when he doesn't even realize that majority of his voters would probably swear to never buy an electric vehicle in the first place. Like you're catering to the wrong party. And it's laughable, honestly.
But it never and they are so good at convincing you that they are the ones for you. That's the funny thing about the Tesla is, you know, the Tesla was Bill Ford said it best. It had nothing to do with being electric. It had to be that they were fun to drive. He said he drove one and he had a blast driving. It was fast. It had whatever. I mean, I'm not a car guy. I have an old truck and I don't really drive fast. I don't do anything really fast. Um, but I mean, but then there's like you said now Trump is this Tesla guy. You've got Teslas on the White House lawn. And he bought one that the staff uses that he doesn't drive anywhere. He's not even allowed in the car to go across the street because it's not secure. It's not secure enough. But so I heard his staff has been using it to do errands with it and stuff. But so you've literally got a president now being a Tesla salesman. You've got and the argument about Teslas again, it's the liberals attacking Tesla. First of all, you see this row of cars on fire. I have a feeling it was a Tesla dealership that set them on fire. I have a feeling they did it themselves. Then you've got the argument Tesla sales have plummeted. Well, we've got 90 reports that panels are flying off the Cybertrucks. And right on top of that, when you look at the new General Motors Hummer, it's this most amazing, beautiful vehicle I've seen in years come out of a dealership floor. So that it's nothing to do with Elon Musk creating Doge and saving America, and his business has gone to shit. His business was shit, and people are realizing his cars are crap, and it's just competition taking over. But again, you've
Yeah.
got this portrayal of a victim, Elon Musk. He's losing it all, saving America. It's like, how do they create these narratives and people buy their bullshit
I mean, and they're gonna buy it every time.
every
It's just
time?
like how they bought, what he did was a Roman salute. He knows exactly what he
Right.
did, and he just wanted to see if he could get away with it, and he did.
He got away with it.
And he did. People cheered for him. Nobody from that side condemned him, and he knew that was going to happen. He just wanted to push his limits. And whether it's due to him having a shit company to begin with or not, and it's a result of his own actions, you know, I'm pretty glad that he got what was coming for him because at least this is a small consequence to something that he might think is minuscule, but what he did was genuinely something I don't think I ever would have seen in my entire life had he not done it. And no less at the inauguration.
Yeah, he did a Nazi salute. Let's call it what it was. I mean, you could say all day it wasn't that, but it was.
Yep.
And he got away with it. And the president was standing right next to him, and everybody says, "Oh no, that's not what it was," because we want to. It's every narrative. I always say, there is a logic. It's not me saying it actually. In theory and in practice, the reason the Vietnam War was so unpopular is because it was the first time war was televised. So we narrowed down how to televise war. So when you got to the Iraq War, the band divisions you saw like this bomb sailing through the sky into the chimney of the building, exactly the building they wanted. But you didn't see the building exploding and bricks flying all over the place and killing babies and old ladies across the street. You saw the bomb sail down the chimney. I've said this on the podcast numerous times, but this is the same thing. The Republicans have created a situation where they build the narrative and it works. And somebody was telling me, because I thought Republicans created this video about like it was AOC boxing. She's getting ready to fight Trump or something. And it was just laughable. And it's like, how did you come up with this terrible commercial initiative? How do you have these terrible ideas? Because you're really scaring off some of your ardent support. Why can't you get the narrative right? Embrace something that people can cling to. I think it should be education. I've always believed it should be education. Democratic Party should come to the realization that education should be their jam. Should be their one like Trump when Reagan came into the presidency, he said the military's been neglected since 1970. So he came into the presidency in about 1980, so it was neglected 10 years. I say our public education system has been neglected since its inception 50 years ago or more. We haven't done a single thing with it. I think under Obama, we put in energy efficient windows or something. But other than that, we haven't done much with our energy education. So I never understood why they don't John Ossoff, the senator that's running for a Georgia special election, and Trump saying he's going to sponsor Marjorie Taylor Greene, which means Elon Musk is going to give her a lot of money to run against him. He never argues the point of what he's going to do. He just keeps having commercials. I need your money to win. And we're coming to the realization it's not money that wins, it's narratives that win.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Um, Unfortunately, common sense isn't so common when it comes to thinking critically about the narratives that Republicans do produce. Um, but again, that's another reason why education is so important. You don't earn the skills to think critically if you don't have an education, nor do you really care to analyze things and realize that just because he says these great things that you want to believe in doesn't mean that they're actually true. And they don't want to believe that he would just lie straight to their faces.
Oh, and he does. He says one time he said, "I know ISIS better than the generals. I know ISIS better than the generals. He knows everything better than everybody," and he says it with a straight face, and people believe it. He's brilliant. Like,
Yeah.
I say, he could jump on the Resolute desk, take a crap on the floor, and his supporters will say, "Oh, it's genius. How did the president think of such a smart thing to do right at that moment?" It's like he's got people convinced. And
Yeah. I'm
that's what
pretty sure.
frustrates me. They call it Trump derangement syndrome. It's not, it's the Trump supporter derangement syndrome I have, not Trump. I don't have it. Trump's succeeding. He's prevailing. I believe he ran for presidency the first time to avert bankruptcy. I believe, and then the second time to avoid criminal prosecution. And he's done both. And
Magically.
and these people are saying it's all us chasing him down. I say, well, if it's all us chasing him down, if it's all wrong, chase down Hillary. See how emotional I get. Catch her ass in something. Put her in jail. See if I argue the point that she doesn't deserve to be prosecuted once on any charge. because they argue. He's never himself argued his innocence. He's only argued his um his immunity, or what do they call that when you're the president? His he's he's only argued he can't be convicted because he's president. He's never
Yeah.
argued his innocence on any charge. Never.
Yep.
Even when he was being impeached by the Democrats, he knew they wouldn't have the votes. The impeachment is just the indictment, it's the process. But he knew they
Right.
wouldn't have the votes to convict. So he never argued his innocence. He just said it's a Democratic witch hunt. It's not. The evidence all there. You sponsored January 6th. It's all there. We're literally, you're saying there was no call records. Yeah, from the White House, you refused to turn over the call records because you are immune as president. But we got the call records from the Proud Boys going to the White House. They weren't immune. We have the records.
Yeah. And it's funny too because a lot of Republicans are like back the blue. They want to support cops and everything, but it's only when it conveniences them. When January 6th happened, nobody gave two shits about the cops that were being absolutely brutalized at the hands of major MAGA supporters, you know? And then he went on to pardon everybody who committed
1,500 of
those
them.
crimes and who were convicted criminals. More for example, I think his name was DJ Rodriguez. He literally shoved a stun gun or onto an officer's throat, and he was pardoned. But no, Trump loves cops and he cares about them so much. But yet he allows things like this to happen.
And what's he even said in the campaign he would not pardon January 6th offenders that had blood on their hands. Essentially, it was just that had criminal, violent activity. But it was just easy enough to just sign all 1,500 or by with the auto pen, which he argued Biden's pardons don't apply because he used the auto pen. But
Right.
and Democrats never argued the point that the auto pen was used on. I don't think Trump signed 1,500 January 6th pardons. I'm sure it was the auto pen. But again, we don't make the point that we never don't I don't know why as a party we don't work hard to improve what we do because we're losing at every level and supposedly we're waiting patiently. Like I say, the collapse is on the way. Supposedly the Democratic leadership is waiting patiently for the collapse, and when it affects everybody is when they're going to come sweeping in and take back the House and the Senate. And I don't think they will. I think we're really in for a terrible 4 years. I do think we're going to retake the White House in 4 years because I think there'll be some new players, Josh Shapiro or Whitmer, and there'll be some message of common sense and how to, we've got to rebuild from the shitstorm that Trump created. But the logic that we're going to prevail in a big way in the midterms, I don't see that happening.
I mean, I also hate the fact that like we're waiting for it to collapse before we actually do something. We should
Right.
be, and making sure that our voices are heard right now. There should be no waiting. It should be you're taking action right now to ensure that all the steps are in place and that you're fighting hard. And so if there is a collapse, you're completely prepared, but you've also been proving to everybody that you've been trying your damnedest to take things over before it does affect everybody.
And they're not. They're not conveying that message at all. They're just sitting back and they're doing the Trump bashing thing, which is like I say, I'm not bashing Trump anymore. I'm bashing the people who really believe in him anymore. Because if you really believe in what's going on now, if you don't see the effects, he promised to fix groceries and we're still no. And then he says, it's hard to roll back prices. I mean, he literally said that in an interview. Now I said it, like I said it in the beginning. I said when they
Yeah.
nominated Hegseth, you've got 52 Republican senators. None of them had the spine to say he is not prepared to be the Secretary of Defense. Now you've got a situation where not only was he on this phone text, group text, the National Security Advisor was on the group text who didn't realize this is a giant issue. So now you've got a National Security Advisor who has no idea how national security works. And I really believe the National Security Advisor, the reason she got the position is because Putin suggested to Trump that position go to her because I just see the connection there. Her whole one and all foreign policy initiative was Syria. Syria collapsed because we actually funded Ukraine, so Putin had to pull all this good stuff out of Syria and send it to Ukraine. So Syria finally collapsed. So she doesn't even have Syria under her belt anymore. There's no longer the Assad regime, which is what she was close to, and she became the national security advisor anyway, with no credentials to do the position other than she said she has an interest in ending the endless wars. But when to that point, Biden ended an endless war, and everybody complained about that. He called bullshit on a bullshit war. He pulled everybody out of Afghanistan. They said, well, the pullout went terrible. Well, you know what? Presidents don't order pullouts. They order pullouts. They don't execute the plan. So why don't you get with the generals that pulled them out in a bad way? And the plan that didn't go so well because we ended a war that didn't need to carry on any further.
Yeah, I think that's one of Republicans' biggest punching bags is they like to criticize him for his pullout of Afghanistan, and I I think that it's, so important to, like you said, consider the people that are actually responsible for these things. Not that he holds no responsibility, but as far as the people who really are in charge of carrying out these plans, what did they do? You know? Um, and when you have, you know, after his first presidency, when you have almost every single important person that worked very closely with him saying that he is unfit for presidency, and everybody ignores that. I mean, I don't even think that there's anything that you can do. Like
Right.
you have the people sitting here that knew him the most, that spoke to him, I'm sure, every day, and are were involved in very critical, American plans, telling you that he should not be president, and then you go and elect him again. I don't even want to hear any criticism. Like,
Right.
I just it's
But you have to think of the magnitude of these staffers that are saying that. Uh, General Mattis, an incredible Marine general. You got Tom Kelly, who said the same thing as chief of staff, an incredible Marine general. You got Bill Barr, which I don't think he's incredible in any way, shape, or form, but he was a devout Republican who said this guy's crazy.
yep.
I don't find anything incredible about his career or his Justice Department credentials, that way he handled things. But he said there was no election fraud. He said clearly the whole thing's bullshit. And you just the list goes on and on and on. And the January 6th committee had video and evidence. I mean, they built a case. And when we looked at the O.J. Simpson trial and O.J. Simpson walked, we were all outraged. But when we look at the January 6th conviction of Donald Trump and the case they built, and he walked, nobody said, "Oh my God, that is just a travesty of justice." They all said, "No, that's the right thing. That's the thing to do." It was very similar in scope to the O.J. Simpson case. You've got the evidence, you're presenting the evidence, chapter and verse, and the guy walks. So you could equate the January 6th committee to O.J. Simpson to who's the one in Florida? Anthony Casey Anthony. You've got
Mhm.
the evidence, and still she walks, and the outrage that she walked. But Trump walked unscathed about January 6th, and everyone's like, "That was the thing to do. We love Trump. He's our guy. How could
Yeah.
you even try to convict such a good man?"
You I always say that in their eyes he can do no wrong.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if he, you know, went and did the most outrageous thing. They'll find some sort of reasoning for it. And they never will for the opposing party. But for him, they will actually, you know, try to make some sense of something. Like, for example, the egg prices. When they
Right.
were high under the Biden administration, they're like, "Oh my God, why is he not doing anything about this? He needs to lower our groceries. I can't believe they're this high." But then when they're still high under the Trump administration, they're saying, "Oh my goodness, it's what is it called? Bird flu that's causing prices to be this high." Did you guys not know about bird flu? Like it's causing a huge epidemic as far as, the birds that produce our eggs. But they never even tried to understand that when we were straight up telling them under the
Yeah.
Biden administration. And that's just how it always will be.
It's always going to be that way. We're always going to have this. We're always going to be the ones chasing the truth, and they're always going to be the ones telling the lies. And it's
Yep.
hard. It's easier to tell a lie, especially when you got a guy like Trump. He's a great salesman. I mean, he was long before he ever became president. I heard the threshold in New York or in the building the business was 95% occupancy, and he was telling people our buildings are at 93, 95% occupancy, when in fact they're at 70% occupancy, and 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 people were, so I always said it won't work. I said it's easy for a businessman to convince a room of 12 of something, but you can't convince the world. And he hasn't convinced the world, but the ones he's convinced is a big part of the world. The experts always argue the
Yep.
point. He's completely wrong. He comes out of a meeting with the with he says, I just met the president of the Virgin Islands during his first presidency. And they say, you're the president of the Virgin Islands. You just met the governor of the president. You just met the governor of the Virgin Islands. And it's okay. He's new in the business. It's okay. It happens. He doesn't. Dan Quayle couldn't spell potato. He could probably spell potato. The card had it spelled wrong, so instinctively he spelled it like the card said. I mean, the teacher gave him the card, and it was the end of his career. I mean, that was it. And I never liked the guy, but he was a true and blue conservative. I mean, and he didn't even want to run for office after that 4 years. He's just tired of being ridiculed. But I mean, I never seen anything like it. I can't make the point enough. I have nothing against Trump. I'm just wondering, seriously, have my serious doubts about Trump supporters. And if they still support him, what will it take to just say, let's get back to a realistic approach? Don't necessarily subscribe to everything Democrat, but just come up with the logic that we need a realistic approach.
Yeah. I I I also find it fascinating the fact that, you know, these people can just really and wholly believe everything that he says and not care to question it, but also, you know, proudly defend it, even with no research, no evidence, no nothing to back themselves up. But they will go out there and tell you until they're blue in the face that this is right and you are wrong, no matter how many facts you have. Like I saw this thing and it was like it's easier to fool somebody than it is to convince somebody that they've been fooled. And it's true.
There's none of his supporters are yet to be convinced that they've been fooled. None of his.
And I
I can
don't think they
honestly,
ever will be.
I don't think there will be. I really don't. And that's what you're up against when you talk about. I mean, I just listened to Steve Bannon say he'll be back for a third term, and he said, and it was Cuomo was interviewing Steve Bannon, and he says, he says, how do you mean? And he says, think of all the predictions we've already made about him. Think about all the naysayers, and then tell me that prediction is crazy. And I'm like, I feel like it's crazy, but it makes me wonder: Is there really going to be a third term Trump? Is there really going to be a Trump third term?
Yeah, I mean, that horrifies me more than anything, probably. But I it's actually even scarier to think that if it happened, it wouldn't even be that crazy because it's kind of been predicted already.
It's kind of par
And
for the course.
yeah, I mean, like, you know, he can say again and again and again that he had no part in Project 2025. But I mean, when you look at the things that were mentioned in Project 2025 and what he's done so far, he's ticked quite a few of the boxes off that they mentioned in the plan. And nobody, I mean, like they really just take no second to really think, you know, is this something that I should actually believe? it should be crazy for anybody to think that he could do a third term. It should be outrageous, actually. But if it happened, I really don't think that they would be outraged. Now, if Kamala had become president and she won a second term and then she went to go in for a third one, it I mean, I think that all hell would break loose.
Oh my God.
But
Yeah.
because it's him, it doesn't matter. They don't care.
No, it is because it's simply put, it's because it's him. He has a hall pass for everything. It's just incredible to me. It's just simply incredible to me. I don't know the logic of it all. People used to say, I used to argue the point too much about his salacious behavior. And I said, okay, I'm done with that. I haven't mentioned it. In 30 episodes, I haven't mentioned his I said, when Steve Cook took over Apple, it is the biggest company in the world, $3 trillion valuation, nobody talked about his personal behavior. This affected everybody's life. 4 billion Apple phone users or Apple device. We never argued his personal behavior. So I said, you know what? I'm done arguing his personal behavior. But just like you said, the bold-faced lie that he didn't know nothing about Project 2025, when in fact he got to office on his first day, he signed 200 executive orders. The litigation that's involved with piecing those puzzles together, executive orders are extremely complicated, and they were ready for him. They were planning his resurfacing as president. It's a lot of trouble to go to prepare that much documentation if he didn't get elected. There was a lot of money invested in that documentation. He couldn't do it at the government's expense if he was not an elected official. There was private citizens funding that litigation, those 200, and they keep surfacing. These executive orders keep surfacing. He sits in front of a classroom of school kids in a smaller Oval Office duplicate desk, like a classroom desk. Should I sign it? And
Yeah,
it's an executive order to shut the department. These kids are like, do it. Now, if I was a kid, that's what I'd be saying. Do it. Yeah, it's cool.
yeah,
And it's like, generally, this type of propaganda and this type of behavior would be frowned upon because you don't play kids for fools. It's one thing you should be above, of all things. Whether it's a good policy or a bad policy, you're playing the kid for a fool because they have no freaking idea what you're talking about.
yeah,
And it's okay.
yeah.
I mean, no, go ahead.
Um, it is really, I feel like the Republicans really dogged on Biden for, his pretty much unawareness during a big portion of his presidency. And yet you have Trump here who doesn't even know what he's technically approving half the time. They're just telling him to sign it and he's doing it. It's like when people were saying that, Elon Musk is the new president and Trump is just the vice president. It's because he not only does he make these, malicious he makes his malicious intent known, but I really don't think that he actually knows what is going on more than half the time. He just talks the big talk, and so people believe what he says.
Well, he's always done that, and he's always been really good at it. He's always, like I said, when he went to the casino authorities in New Jersey and said, "When I take things over, I fix them," and then 2 weeks later, he filed bankruptcy, and
Yeah,
it's like nobody. I remember I had a friend when I was a kid. He did some work in one of his apartments and never got paid. I don't have any more contact with the person, but I'm almost positive he's a Trump supporter. I'm almost positive. It's just this anomaly of Trump that I don't hold it against Trump. I hold it against the anomaly. I hold it against the people who support him. You really support this. You still support. You're that frustrated with government. I get it. Politicians have an average of keeping 4 to 5% of their promises, and you feel like Trump's the guy that says it and does it. But we're at the point now. In his first term, he said it and did it or didn't do it. He didn't do much at all. That's why everybody saw this prosperous first term because really we just rode on the coattails of Obama. Because one of the biggest hindrances in America is the fact that we switch gears faster than the Yamaha every 4 to 8 years. We reverse everything every 4 to 8 years. With Trump, it was a continuation of Obama's policy. He had no idea what he was doing, so he didn't do anything. So
yeah,
you literally had the coattails of Obama's economics carry through his entire presidency. And then you argue the point that he had even cheap gas prices. Well, nobody was driving anywhere. It's the guy graduated Wharton's business school. He should understand supply and demand. We had COVID. Nobody could even get their car out of the driveway. So, you have
Exactly.
ships full of oil. They have nowhere to even freaking put it. You've got drills that you can't even stop in the Middle East that are pumping more oil for the ships that aren't coming back empty. So yeah, the prices dropped. But nobody, they still talk about, they still revere the low fuel prices under Trump's watch, the continued economic evolution under Trump's watch, which is Obama's coattails. So, and he's got it all convinced. He's got everybody convinced that this is all his doing, this magic touch he had. And I get
Yeah.
it. Some people are ignorant to believe it, but when you point it out to them and they still argue on his behalf, then you got to say, I'm just talking to a freaking idiot. There's no point to talking about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as far as gas prices go, I'm always appalled when somebody tries to tell me that the president controls the gas prices because they either don't know about supply and demand or, they just refuse to acknowledge that maybe it's not actually Biden's fault that, gas prices were high at the beginning of his term. And it's also not his doing that they were low towards the end of his term. Like it really is all supply and demand.
It's all it is.
And it doesn't really get much simpler than that. But when it's good, it's because Trump did it, and when it's bad,
It's because Biden
it's
did it.
because Biden did it.
Yeah, it's incredible. Because even
Yeah.
on Biden's watch, when the prices jumped, there was stickers at pumps. Biden did that, which again
Oh,
was
yeah.
created by some wealthy billionaire. But the truth is, and I pointed this out before, in America, the president's report card is truly gas prices. We are the most auto-intensive country in the world. So gas prices are high. You're looking right at the president when you look at a gas price that's high. So Biden literally ordered his energy secretary to go to Houston and issue permits. They said, "How do we bring these down?" They issued permits. The most permits of any administration, most drilling permits of any administration, still till today, still when Trump leaves office in 4 years, he will never have been able to issue the amount of drilling permits Biden issued in his first 4 years. It is only 4 year term. And where I'm landing with this is the narrative. If a Republican says drill baby drill, we've got an energy policy we love. If you tell people Biden is the one that issued more drilling permits than any other administration ever, and it will never be repeated against them because there's some spots we can no longer offer more drilling permits in the area of. They'll tell you you're all got it all messed up. Tell you
Yeah.
I'm just a clueless idiot. What are you talking about?
Yeah. I mean,
We
like you said, it's Trump was able to ride off of Obama's economy. And if he wasn't messing things up so, you know, greatly, he could have also continued the economy that Biden got us to. You know, I think that we really take for granted what Biden did with the economy during his presidency after being handed practically almost the worst economy from Trump. And he completely turned it around. And I feel like a lot of people don't give him credit for that. You know, I'm definitely somebody who can call out things on both sides, especially when it comes to Trump. But, that's something that Republicans aren't able to do. And they also can't credit when the Democratic Party actually does something good. And they won't. They will refuse to. They will just say that it was Trump's doing that the economy is going, smoothly during his presidency.
Well, this is why we need. I think I'm going to wrap it up with this because this has been incredible, and you can't beat a win. So this is why we need young people, and this is why I will continue to ask young people like yourself back on and friends on with you because this is what we need is a new generation of politicians because the old generation is getting us nowhere. So I'm telling you now, John Ossoff is probably going to lose in Georgia. Because my own feeling is if you keep just talking about the only way you're going to solve this problem is by sending me money for my campaign, I'm at the point now where campaign funding is pointless. I think politicians should do what Trump did because one of the biggest turning points in his campaign was the 3 hours he spent with Joe Rogan. He presented himself as a human being. And $3 billion in billboard snippets and Facebook snippets doesn't do that. But that three
Yeah.
hours he spent with Joe Rogan, so I love to say this because I know it's silly to say, but I want to be the political no-brainer that all the politicians come to and make themselves known for who they really are as a person. For that when they're being quizzed by a difficult interviewer or by me, how do they respond? Because if I get a Democratic politician on this show, I'm going to tell them, y'all suck at the game of politics. And how are you going to improve it? Because if you don't improve it, you're going to continue to lose. I said that about Obama. I said as much as he was a popular president, that was the macro. But the micro fact of it was we lost 1,000 seats in local government all across the country when he was president for 8 years. We lost school boards, we lost dog catchers and water authorities because he was, and they had this. They say it's a condescending term. They were calling him Professor Obama. Call me Professor Trippy and see if I think it's condescending. I mean, he was a smart guy, but he didn't have an emotional connection to. He had an intellectual connection. So I'm going to ask every Democratic politician, how are you going to make the emotional connection that Trump has made with his voters? Because no matter what he does, it's right.
Yeah.
No matter how hard we push, you won't listen to us. No matter how much we prove to you he's an idiot, you come back and tell us he's an absolute genius. So how are you going to be that Democrat that does that? Because that's what we need now.
Yeah. I mean, it stinks to say that like I don't really ever want to understand exactly how they are able to believe everything that he says, but we do need somebody that is able to convince as good as he does.
We did a lot of those somebodies all across the
Yeah.
country. I saw that in Josh Shapiro. I know I said I'm gonna end it. I'm gonna get it. But in Josh, I never believed for a minute that Kamala Harris picked Tim Walz. I believed always that Josh Shapiro said no. I believe that Josh Shapiro felt like this is not enough time to create a winning campaign, and I don't want to be labeled as a loser. I do want to be president someday. So I think he did tell her no, and Tim Walz was the next best bet. But if Josh Shapiro is going to come out and run for president, because he's very popular, I think it's in Pennsylvania, he needs to be that popular guy. He cannot suddenly get scared to play the game of politics. He needs to be the guy
Right.
he is as governor of Pennsylvania. And he needs to create more of him, because then I think we're really on to something. And I'm just hoping we're really on to something because like I say, I have no skin in the game anymore. At 60 years old, what am I going to accomplish anymore? My kids are getting older. My, I'm very happy with my life. I'm happy with my share of the bounty. I'm not. There's not a lot I can do with the rest of my life. There's a book Warren Buffett's son wrote, and it's a good book, but I always talk about the title. It's called he's a farmer. Warren Buffett's son is a farmer enthusiast. He says 40 chances to feed a hungry world. My 40 chances are about up. So these last 5 or 6 chances I have, the next 5 or 6 years I have to do this podcast isn't going to get us very far. But I'm going to keep bringing on young people that like you that are going to get us to the next step because that's my hope is that somebody takes the ball and runs with it and changes America for the good and for the long, long term.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of, at least, the people that I talk to, a lot of us are hoping that somebody who is a little bit younger comes along and is able to fight the fight that we all really need them to. Because, like you said, the old people that are stuck in office, they're never even going to have to live through the decisions that they make. And we
Right.
will.
You will. You will. It's gonna be a shitstorm for you guys. I mean, and it's gonna be your problem to fix. I mean, like you said. I mean, you think Chuck Schumer is gonna or Mitch McConnell is gonna be able to fix anything? I mean, Mitch McConnell can't even finish a day's work without getting rushed off to the hospital. And I mean, Chuck Schumer is right there with them. I mean, and Nancy Pelosi, I think she's almost 90. I mean,
Yeah, it's
I mean, she stepped down from a leadership position, but it's still a full-time job to be a House of Representatives. There's votes every day you got to show up for. Or if you don't show up, you can't vote. I mean, 90 years old, I don't want to show up for nothing. I'll be lucky if I walk out in the front yard and pick some weeds for 10 minutes. I don't, but I really, let me say this because I really do want to have you back. And and I know your schedule is busy, but I'm going to continue to text you and figure out because
Okay.
I want to continue this conversation because it's actually incredible. It is incredible. It's not actually incredible. I knew it would be incredible, but I want to continue it. But I also want to. I know you want to do other things tonight. And, so I'm going to say two things. Actually, I'm going to hope this gets. Let me say this when I stop the recording. So Samantha Turner, you've been incredible.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your outlook on everything. I want you back. If you have friends that want to join us, including my daughter, I want Lauren. I want her back. I'm looking forward to doing it again. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Samantha Turner. It's been amazing.